When humanity first stepped beyond its solar system, the galaxy barely noticed. Countless civilizations had risen before, most falling into patterns: war, trade, alliances, collapse. And so when the species called Homo sapiens sent out its first true deep space signal, it was just a whisper in the crowded void, an echo easily lost among the towering empires of the stars. Yet something about it caught attention, something that couldn't be explained. Perhaps it was the way the signal didn't request help, didn't beg for trade, or try to impress, but simply declared, in plain language, "We are here," and then nothing more. Which puzzled the archivists of the Vorthari conquered, who monitored new species and cataloged their development for the Great Archive. As they were used to desperate noise, not silence, so they dispatched an observation drone to Sul, Earth's star, expecting to find a world still growing into its skin, but instead found signs of war, yes, but not the kind they expected, for this was a planet that had almost destroyed itself and then stopped. A species that built weapons to burn oceans and then locked them away in silence. A civilization fractured and chaotic, but somehow still alive, still reaching. And when the drone was detected and shot down by a pulse of crude but efficient kinetic energy, a weapon launched from a dark site hidden in the Greenland ice, the Vorthari grew curious, and then uneasy, because no one was supposed to detect the drone, let alone destroy it. Earth should not have had that kind of awareness, and yet it had. And not only that, the humans had sent no message, made no threat, just went back to silence, which made the Vorthari High Archivist send a full diplomatic ship, hoping to get answers, only to find that Earth refused entry, its orbital defenses, simple, yes, but enough to show intent, locked on and tracking. And again, no threats were issued. No displays of aggression, just silence and presence. Like a predator standing in the dark, not attacking but not retreating either. And that began to draw the attention of others. The Talari swarm, who viewed all young species as food or tools, sent a probe and lost it somewhere near Jupiter, not in battle, not in malfunction. It just vanished. And then 3 of their border colonies experienced blackouts, never proven to be connected, but close enough in time to draw whispers. The Urith coalition tried to send an emissary disguised as a wandering merchant, only to report that human AIs had already mapped and tracked his path months before arrival, and greeted him with polite warnings and exit routes. And still, no. Human leaders appeared. No great council made speeches. No interstellar alliances were offered. They simply watched, prepared, waiting. And the galaxy, filled with empires used to shouting their power, didn't know what to make of a species that didn't speak unless spoken to, and even then said so little. So when the Grand Conclave finally demanded that humanity send a representative to explain its intentions, what came instead was a single unmanned ship, small, slow, and old by galactic standards, arriving at the Council's space station with a single crystal data core and a message: "We are not interested in your wars, your politics, or your boundaries. We are watching, and we are learning," which sent ripples through the galaxy, because it wasn't a threat. And yet every species who read it felt as though it was a warning, a kind of quiet confidence that said, "We've seen what you are, and we've decided not to play your game." And that was terrifying in a way that open war never was, because fear of the unknown is always deeper than fear of guns. And in this case, the unknown was a species that had walked to the edge of its own extinction and turned away, one that had built its chaos into progress, its pain into memory, and now stood silent at the edge of the stars, not asking for a seat, not claiming dominion, but simply observing, and in doing so, making everyone else nervous. For how do you face an enemy who does not fight, or a rival who does not compete, or a people who do not speak, but only stand, eyes wide open, unafraid, as if they've already seen what's coming next? After the mysterious message arrived, the galaxy waited for humanity's next move with a mixture of hope and fear. But what came instead was silence. Thick, deep, and unbroken silence that echoed louder than any war cry as one by one, human colonies disappeared from galactic records, their communications cut off, their fleets recalled or vanished without a trace, and no explanations were given, no signals answered, Only the cold emptiness where vibrant human activity once thrived, which confused and terrified the leaders of the great empires, who had expected either aggression or alliance, something to grasp onto, but instead found nothing but a void that spoke louder than words. And this silence was not weakness, because the humans did not collapse under pressure or fear, but stood firm, their homeworld fortified beyond any previous measure, their orbital defenses humming with quiet but deadly efficiency, while below, humanity prepared in ways unseen by outsiders, refusing to take part in the galactic conflicts that raged around them, their refusal like a stone dropped in the middle of a raging river, forcing currents to split and reconsider their paths. And the galaxy, so used to open battlefields, to threats shouted across star systems and alliances forged in fire, was unprepared for a species that simply said no, that walked away from the chaos without a backward glance, causing unease in the ruling councils who wondered if this was surrender or something far worse, a new kind of war that started with silence and ended with domination without a fight. Rumors spread that humans had developed weapons so devastating they chose not to use them, that their technology bent physics and reality itself. But none of this could be confirmed, and every attempt to pry deeper was met with a wall of quiet resistance, not violence, but a refusal to engage on the galaxy's terms. And as months turned into years, the silence grew heavier, stretching across star charts, blotting out human systems like stars extinguished in a black hole, and other species began to feel the weight of that quiet more than any enemy's gunfire. For to not respond was to let the unknown creep into every corner of their thoughts, making them question their own strength and resolve. And during this time, several powerful factions tried to provoke humans to act, to force them to reveal whether their silence was cowardice or confidence, sending ships near human space, testing borders with minor incursions, and even sending diplomats to offer peace or war, only to be met with stony refusal or ignored altogether, which was a new kind of defiance. And those few emissaries who managed to speak to human representatives described them as calm, unshaken, and strangely patient, as if humanity had decided on a path no one else understood, but were prepared to see through no matter the cost. And in one notable incident, a fleet from the Xylar Dominion advanced to blockade a human mining colony suspected of harboring secret technologies. But the humans neither fought nor fled. Instead, they evacuated their civilians quietly, dismantled sensitive equipment, and left the colony abandoned, a deliberate gesture that said more than words could, that they would not be baited into battle or drawn into the endless conflicts that plagued the galaxy, causing whispers that humanity was rewriting the rules of engagement simply by refusing to play. And these actions sent shockwaves through military commanders who realized that a species capable of such discipline and restraint might be far more dangerous than those who shouted their threats loudly, because power, disguised as peace, is a weapon that cannot be seen until it strikes. And meanwhile, the galaxy's spies and scholars tried to unravel the mystery of human culture during this silent stand, discovering histories of near collapse, of wars that nearly erased humanity from existence, of a species forged in struggle against extinction, which explained their new attitude, no longer seeking conquest or glory, but survival on their own terms. And this survival was no surrender but a statement, a quiet declaration that they would not be swept into the endless cycles of destruction that other civilizations accepted as inevitable. And so, as the years dragged on, the galaxy became divided between those who respected humanity's choice to stand aside and those who saw it as a threat to the established order, fearing that a silent force could someday rise and change everything without warning. And as tensions built beneath this uneasy peace, the humans remained still, watching the galaxy's wars, learning from the chaos without a word, while others prepared for the inevitable moment when humanity would finally decide to speak, to move, to act. But until then, the galaxy held its breath, caught in the shadow of a silent stand that said more than any gunfire could, a stand that made every star system ask quietly, what is humanity truly waiting for? The galaxy had watched humanity's silent stand for years, and curiosity turned into concern as rumors began to swirl about the true nature of human power. Whispers in dark corners of starports and quiet conversations in council chambers spoke of strange signals coming from forgotten human systems, of sudden bursts of energy that defied known science, and scouts who ventured too close returned with baffled reports of technologies that seemed alive, moving and adapting like living creatures rather than cold machines, which unsettled many who believed they understood the laws of physics and war. For what humans appeared to have was not just weapons or fleets, but a force that combined intelligence, adaptability, and something almost beyond comprehension, a connection between their technology and themselves that made each tool an extension of their will. Yet no one outside humanity knew how deep this went, as all attempts to spy or steal their secrets met with dead ends. Encrypted data or silent shutdowns, and the human worlds, hidden in shadows and cloaked from many sensors, began to show signs of transformation. Old factories were replaced by vast bioengineering centers, research stations that did not hum with metal but pulsed with organic energy, strange fields of light and color that warped space and time itself, leading scientists from other species to theorize that humans were not just advancing their technology, but evolving it into a new form, blurring the line between biology and machine, a living network of power unlike anything seen before. And this idea terrified some and fascinated others, because it meant humans were no longer bound by the simple rules of war and conquest, but might move in ways invisible and unstoppable. And while the galaxy debated, humans remained outwardly calm, sending no signals, issuing no challenges, only quietly perfecting their crafts in the hidden corners of their space. But those who watched closely noticed subtle shifts. Human fleets, though small and slow by galactic standards, maneuvered with surprising speed and precision, their ships weaving through asteroid fields and nebulae in patterns that suggested an intelligence far beyond their size. And in rare moments when human vessels appeared near trade routes or border systems, they displayed an uncanny ability to avoid detection or confrontation, slipping past patrols as if invisible, or appearing suddenly to disable enemy ships with non-lethal pulses that shut down systems and left crews unharmed but powerless, signaling that humanity's strength was not built to destroy indiscriminately, but to disable and control, a power designed not for war, but for peace enforced by an unseen hand. And the human people themselves became a subject of fascination. Their resilience to hardship and their ability to unite under a common cause baffled sociologists across the galaxy, for they had witnessed countless species crumble under pressure or divide into factions. Yet humans, despite their past chaos and violence, showed an unshakable will to survive and grow stronger. And as tensions simmered across star systems, a few daring individuals tried to engage humans in dialogue, only to find their words met with measured silence or enigmatic replies that hinted at a purpose beyond mere survival, a purpose tied to the very fabric of the galaxy. And then came a revelation that shook even the most skeptical. An intercepted message from a secret human outpost revealed a plan, not to conquer, not to fight, but to awaken the galaxy itself, to push all species to rise beyond their petty wars and old grudges, to evolve or perish. And this message, though encoded and hidden, spread like wildfire, stirring hope and fear alike, because it suggested humanity had seen beyond the current chaos and held a vision for the future that included everyone, but only if they were ready. And this brought new urgency to the question, what would humanity do when it finally stepped out of the shadows and showed the galaxy its true strength, a strength born not from weapons or fleets, but from an unbreakable spirit and the power to change the rules of existence. A strength that promised either salvation or destruction depending on who wielded it and why. And as star systems waited and watched, the galaxy realized that humanity was no longer the silent enigma it once was, but a force quietly building toward something greater, something that could rewrite the destiny of all life among the stars. And no one could say if that future would bring peace or chaos, only that the hidden strength of humanity was awakening. And when it did, everything would change forever. After years of silence and mystery, humanity's return to the galaxy was unlike anything anyone expected, because they did not come back with great fleets or weapons of destruction, but with ships that seemed alive, moving with a grace and intelligence that defied all known engineering, their hulls glowing softly like living organisms, as if the ships themselves were breathing and thinking. And when these vessels appeared near major trade routes and border worlds, they did not attack or demand tribute, but instead opened channels of communication with calm, clear messages that unsettled the galaxy's strongest empires. Humans announced that they had moved beyond war and conflict, that their focus was no longer domination but evolution, and they invited others to join a new chapter of cooperation, based on understanding and mutual growth, which was met with suspicion and disbelief, for no species had ever turned away from power struggles so completely without some hidden agenda. So the great empires watched closely, expecting betrayal or violence. But none came, only patience and quiet persistence, and as humans established small, organic-looking stations at the edges of contested space, they demonstrated technology that healed damaged ecosystems on planets, repaired broken starships in hours, and restored dying stars to faint glimmers of light, feats that others said were impossible. And these acts inspired some species to reconsider their endless wars, while others feared it as a form of control, a slow takeover by unknown means, and the humans themselves spoke little of politics or conquest, instead sharing stories of their past, of near extinction, of struggles that shaped their will to survive, not through force, but through cooperation and care, their leaders describing a journey that led them to see value in every life and every world. And yet beneath this gentle message lay an unshakable strength, a readiness that made even the most aggressive commanders wary, because humanity had learned to fight without fighting, to win without battle, and to stand firm without raising a weapon. And during this time, a sudden crisis erupted when a rogue faction from the Xylar Dominion attacked a human convoy passing near the rim of explored space, expecting an easy victory over what they believed were weakened targets. But the humans responded with non-lethal precision, disabling the attackers' engines and weapons almost effortlessly, then offered medical aid and peace talks, an act that stunned the galaxy and challenged the old ideas of power and revenge. And as more such incidents occurred, the legend of humanity's new way grew, a strange mix of mercy and power that unsettled friend and foe alike. And as humans continued to extend their presence, some began to suspect that this return was not a retreat or a surrender, but a transformation, a sign that humanity had crossed a threshold no other species had yet dared to approach, the threshold of true evolution, where war was no longer a language and strength was measured in the ability to build rather than destroy. And yet the galaxy remained on edge, because no one knew what would happen if humanity's patience ever broke, or if some ancient fear buried deep in their history reawakened. And in the quiet moments between the great displays of technology and diplomacy, human leaders met in hidden chambers, speaking softly of a future that was still unwritten, a future where the galaxy might finally learn to walk away from its old wars or face consequences far beyond its understanding. And so, as the luminous ships of humanity glided silently through star systems, their crews watching and learning, the galaxy waited, suspended in a fragile hope that the return of humans would bring peace, or else a reckoning that would shake every star from its orbit. Because the truth was clear to all who observed closely. Humanity had returned not as conquerors or victims, but as something new, a force neither fully known nor understood, standing quietly at the dawn of a new age, ready to show the galaxy that the greatest power was not to fight or rule, but to stand tall and walk a different path, even when the whole universe watched with fear and wonder. The galaxy, still unsettled by humanity's quiet return and extraordinary demonstrations of power, soon faced a challenge unlike any before, when a coalition of powerful empires, uneasy with the new human presence, sent a fleet to test whether their peaceful words hid secret plans of domination. And this fleet, vast and heavily armed, entered human-controlled space with the intent to force a confrontation and prove that no species could ignore the established order without consequence. But instead of meeting fire with fire, the humans responded with calm determination, deploying a small, swift task force that moved with uncanny precision, not to attack, but to surround and disable the intruders, using technology that rendered weapons useless and engines powerless, and then communicated a simple message. We seek no war, but will not be coerced, which sent ripples of shock through the coalition, because this was no surrender, nor threat, but a clear and unyielding stand that neither bowed nor raised a blade, And as the fleet lay immobilized yet unharmed, the human commanders opened talks, inviting the coalition leaders to discuss a new way forward, a way that rejected endless conflict and embraced cooperation. Yet many in the coalition saw this as weakness, and factions within plotted to break the standoff by force, while others debated whether to trust a species that had remained silent for so long. And in the midst of this tension, rumors spread of a hidden human weapon, not one that destroyed, but one that could change the very nature of space and time, bending realities in a way that made the galaxy's greatest scientists doubt their own knowledge. And when a small group of explorers from a rival empire tried to infiltrate a secret human facility to learn the truth, they found themselves caught in a maze of living technology, machines that adapted to their movements and seemed to anticipate their every step, forcing them to retreat in awe and fear. And this deepened the mystery of what humans truly held, for it was clear their power came not just from ships or weapons, but from an understanding of the universe far beyond that of others. And as days passed, the standoff stretched into weeks, and the galaxy watched, wondering if this challenge would ignite war or bring a new peace. And then, unexpectedly, one of the coalition's youngest commanders, inspired by the humans' restraint and vision, secretly met with a human envoy, and their talks revealed that humanity's challenge was not a demand for submission, but an invitation to evolve, to choose a path beyond violence and destruction, a path that required courage not to fight, but to change. And this revelation split the coalition, some embracing the offer, while others hardened their resolve to resist, fearing loss of power and identity. And as tensions reached a breaking point, a sudden crisis erupted when a rogue faction within the coalition launched a surprise attack on a human settlement, believing it would force the humans to retaliate and show their weakness. But the humans responded with unexpected restraint, using their advanced technology to isolate and neutralize the attackers without casualties, then extending aid to the wounded and offering dialogue, actions that stunned even their enemies and forced the coalition's leaders to reconsider their stance. And through all this, humanity stood firm, not as conquerors nor victims, but as teachers and protectors of a fragile hope that the galaxy could change. And as the challenge unfolded, the question on everyone's lips was no longer if humanity was strong, but how far their strength could reach, and whether the galaxy was ready to accept the challenge of walking away from its old ways and stepping into a future defined not by war, but by unity and understanding. And in this uncertain moment, humanity's silent power was louder than ever, sending a message not of fear, but of possibility, that even in the darkest reaches of space, change was possible if one dared to stand and face the unknown without turning away. The galaxy had reached a boiling point, torn between fear and wonder at humanity's actions, still unsure whether the humans were saviors or something far more dangerous. And just when the uneasy peace seemed close to breaking, the revelation came not as a weapon or a threat, but as a broadcast, one message sent across every known system, translated into every language, reaching the minds and hearts of every species at once. And the voice that spoke was calm, clear, and unmistakably human, telling the story that no outsider had ever heard, a story that began long ago when humanity faced extinction not once but many times, not from alien threats but from within, from their own violence, greed, and ignorance, and how, after surviving endless wars and the slow death of their own planet, they finally chose a different path, not by building bigger weapons or stronger walls, but by stepping back and listening to the universe itself, learning from the stars, studying the hidden laws of time, matter, and thought, discovering things that others had dismissed as myth, and how over generations they stopped chasing power and began understanding it, transforming their technology into something alive, something that grew with them, something that responded not just to commands but to the will of those who used it. And the voice in the message explained that this was the hidden strength humanity had carried all along, not just machines or weapons, but the ability to change, the courage to look at their darkest nature and rise above it, and that the silence they had chosen was not weakness, but preparation, a quiet rebuilding of not only their cities and ships, but their very purpose. And as the message continued, it showed images, humans walking through glowing forests where machines hummed like birds, ships that flew without fuel, powered by thought and harmony, and worlds they had healed, once barren and dead, now blooming with life again. And it became clear that humanity had learned to create instead of destroy, and that this knowledge had made them strong in a way the galaxy could not measure with numbers or ships. And the most shocking part came when the message revealed what humans had discovered buried deep in space, a signal older than any known civilization, a whisper from something ancient, something watching, and that humanity had unlocked it, not with force, but with understanding, and through it had glimpsed a coming storm, a threat not from humans or empires, but from beyond the edges of known space, something dark and cold that fed on conflict and fear, and that this was why humans had returned, not to conquer, but to warn, to prepare, and to offer a chance to stand together before the true enemy arrived. And when the message ended, silence fell again. But this time it was not the silence of confusion or fear, but of realization, as leaders and citizens across the stars tried to make sense of what they had just heard, some denying it, calling it human deception, others falling into panic, but many beginning to ask the questions they had been too proud or too afraid to ask. And in the days that followed, more human ships appeared, not to threaten, but to guide, offering knowledge and help to those willing to listen. And while some still resisted, unwilling to believe that humanity had truly changed, others opened their doors and their minds, starting slow talks of unity and defense. For if the revelation was true, then everything was at stake, and through it all, humanity remained steady, neither forcing nor begging, but standing as a silent pillar in a galaxy full of doubt and fear, waiting for others to choose, not between war and peace, but between the past and the future. And so the revelation spread not just through systems and networks, but through hearts and beliefs, reshaping the way people looked at the stars and at each other, because now they knew there was more out there than just power struggles and old rivalries. There was something coming, and only together, as one, could the galaxy hope to face it. The revelation had spread through the galaxy like a wave, shaking foundations and stirring minds. And now, as species grappled with the truth of the coming darkness, a new force began to awaken, not just within humanity, but across worlds old and new, as the knowledge shared by humans sparked something deep inside the hearts of many, a spark that grew into a flame, a collective awakening that changed how beings saw themselves and their place in the universe. Because the warning was clear, the enemy beyond the stars fed on division and fear, on hatred and violence, and if the galaxy remained fractured, it would fall easily, but if it united, it might survive. And with this knowledge, human scientists worked alongside alien minds, creating new technologies and strategies that blended the best of all worlds, not to dominate, but to protect, crafting networks of defense that pulsed with life and intelligence, ships that moved like shadows but struck with the force of storms, and shields that bent light and sound to hide entire planets from enemy eyes. And as this great collaboration unfolded, something extraordinary happened. The awakening of latent powers within individuals, powers not born of machines or science, but of connection and will. Humans and aliens alike began to experience moments of clarity and strength, sensing the threads that tied all life together, able to influence machines with thought alone, to heal wounds with touch, to see paths in the stars that others missed. And this phenomenon, once thought impossible, became the new hope, proof that evolution was more than physical. It was spiritual and mental, and as these gifted individuals trained and grew, they formed councils and orders, guiding fleets and worlds in preparation for the unknown. But even as the galaxy united, old fears and rivalries lingered in shadows, and secret groups worked to exploit the chaos for their gain, fearing that unity would end their power, and in a hidden place, a conspiracy formed to strike at the heart of the human-led alliance, aiming to ignite war and scatter the newly forged bonds. But before they could act, the awakened forces sensed the disturbance, moving swiftly to prevent catastrophe, their actions mysterious and swift, leaving those behind confused and powerless. And this event only deepened the awe and respect many held for humanity and its allies. For it was clear that the awakening was not just about power, but about responsibility. The responsibility to protect and to unite, and in quiet moments, Human leaders spoke of the journey still ahead, of the long road to true peace and survival, for the coming storm was unlike any war known before, a darkness that would test not just fleets and weapons, but the very soul of the galaxy. And as planets rallied their defenses and stars burned bright with preparation, the awakening spread further, touching even the most distant and isolated worlds, awakening hope and courage where none existed before. And in this great turning, humanity stood not at the center as conquerors, but as catalysts, sparking a transformation that showed all life, that strength came not from domination, but from standing together, awakening to the truth that the galaxy was not a battlefield, but a home, fragile and precious. And as the stars shimmered with renewed light, the question on everyone's lips was no longer if the darkness would come, but if the awakened galaxy was ready to face it as one. And when the first shadows fell, no one would stand alone, because the awakening had begun, and with it, the hope that the greatest story in the universe was just beginning. The battle that followed was unlike any the galaxy had ever seen, for it was not fought with brute force, alone, but with minds, hearts, and the very essence of life itself. As the darkness foretold by humanity's revelation finally emerged from the shadows beyond known space, a vast, cold presence that swallowed stars and bent reality with unnatural will, seeking to consume all light and hope. And yet, the awakened galaxy stood firm, united by bonds forged in trust and shared purpose, led by humans who had long prepared not just for war, but for a transformation of existence. And as fleets of living ships clashed with shadowy entities that seemed to shift and dissolve at will, the gifted individuals, those awakened to new powers, became the linchpins of defense, wielding energy and thought like swords and shields, healing allies and unraveling enemy attacks with skill that left even the oldest commanders breathless. And amid the chaos, stories of heroism and sacrifice spread across planets, inspiring those who watched to believe in a future beyond fear, even as darkness crept closer, threatening to erase everything. And in the heart of the conflict, a human leader named Mira stood at the forefront, a symbol of the legacy humanity carried. The legacy of survival, growth, and hope, for she had seen the worst of what humanity once was, and the best it could become. And with quiet determination, she guided the fleet through the fiercest battles, reminding all that their fight was not just for survival, but for the chance to build a galaxy where no species needed to fear its neighbor. And as the war raged, ancient alliances were reforged and new ones born, with former enemies standing shoulder to shoulder against the encroaching void. And through this unity, the galaxy learned the true meaning of strength, not domination or conquest, but the courage to stand together when all seemed lost. And slowly, the tide began to turn, as the living ships and awakened warriors pushed back the darkness, reclaiming star after star, restoring light where shadow had reigned. And in the final moments, as the enemy made its last desperate strike, humanity and its allies unleashed a surge of power born from their unity and hope, a wave that shattered the dark force and sealed it beyond reach, leaving the galaxy forever changed, but free. And as silence returned, the stars once again shone brightly, reflecting the new dawn, born from the fires of conflict, a dawn where the legacy of humanity, the legacy of standing and walking away from destruction, of choosing cooperation over war, became the foundation for a future where all species could thrive, not as rivals, but as neighbors, friends, and partners in the endless journey among the stars. And so, with the darkness behind and hope ahead, the galaxy began to write a new story, one of peace, discovery, and boundless possibility. A story that would be remembered as the legacy of the species that dared to walk away from fear and walk together into the light.